Between 1940 and 1970, the population of Issaquah grew fivefold. The town was changing rapidly as open space and old buildings started giving way to strip malls and housing developments. Among the old landmarks that were lost to make way for this development was the house belonging to Dr. W.E. Gibson. His home was sort of a stately Victorian home on the corner of what is now Andrews and Front Street. The house was attractive, and Gibson was also significant as an early mayor and town doctor in Issaquah. So the loss of this structure really hit a lot of people as a sign that many of the historic structures and the history of the town were starting to disappear to make way for this new growth and development. When the Issaquah Historical Society formed in 1972, their mission statement contained the phrase, "to preserve what is left of our town." So that's very telling, that it indicates that they felt like their town was changing forever and they had to act quickly if they wanted to save any part of its heritage.
We'd like to held on to it ourselves, but we didn't have any money. Highway 10 going through, and then high taxes, because they said the land would be developed and we knew we couldn't hang on to it and we had to get out of it. They wanted to tear the barn down and develop the 9 acres. And a lot of people rallied around that, and it really helped because I think it saved the barn. They just couldn't fix it. It was needed too bad. It was too bad a repair. Had big meetings at City Hall and people would get up and talk. They wanted to keep it. They wanted to see it was going to cost a couple of million to fix it. A lot of people resented that. But other people said, well, what the hell, you spend $2 million for doing other things, you might as well fix that old barn. It's a part of history. Been there for all since 1878. A lot of people would call me on the telephone, or I'd see him walking uptown on the street and ask me about it. My opinion was, don't sell the barn, or don't tear it down. People talked about it, but nothing was really done. And I don't think it really didn't get settled till, way into the 90s. And it was in 94 when they tore the old barn down and built a new one. They reconstructed the barn exactly like the old one was built in 1878. It's on the same foundation, only a new foundation. Everything is new, but it's on the same spot exactly. Same size, same everything. They use a lot of the same boards and lumber. It was done very well. I commend the city for what they did. I wanted something to remind me of the barn once I knew it was either going to be redone or something. So when they redid the barn, I pulled 2 of these old spikes out of a 2x6, took a torch and I heated them and bent them, went to an Indian friend of mine that did turquoise. He put the turquoise in and I wear it, and it reminds me of the barn, and it's close to my heart. When I got married in '47, I lived in one of the bunkhouses at the barn. I fixed it all up and lived in that for 17 years. And during that time, my dad gave all of us 5 kids an acre of land up across the Newport on the edge of the hill. And so I went up and started to build a house in 1954, and it took me 9 years to build a house, and that's the house I live in now.
In Issaquah, there was very little in the way of shopping, and people would complain that they had to go to Bellevue.
He had an estate that he was working with, and he convinced the trustees of that estate that their piece of property could be used for a very unique purpose. And the end result of that discussion was what we call Gilman Boulevard.
We had an opportunity to do something with a piece of property that Marvin had an interest in, and that led to what is now called Gilman Village, a specialty shopping center. The buildings were people's homes, and they were used by a number of early families in Issaquah, almost early 1900s or even turn of the century. Marvin had never moved houses before, but somehow or other he figured out how to do it. And the mere novelty of it, moving these houses down Front Street across the railroad tracks to the Gilman Village location, was quite an event.
Marvin was very interested in preserving history of Issaquah, and he was very interested in, of course, helping his client, and he was very interested in creativity. As people were taking the old homes down and destroying them, he would buy them and move them down to this piece of property, and then he would change them into business facilities, as you see today.
The initial reaction to Gilman Village was one of questioning. There were people on the planning commission who thought that it was going to be a dumping ground for these old buildings. The boarding house was going to have beer and wine, and they thought, oh, this would create a terrible atmosphere for the women in Issaquah. And so it just was one of those things that we had to overcome. I remember Marvin wrote a letter to the Issaquah Press trying to explain what he was trying to do. And I think once it started and was underway, there was such universal acceptance and such pleasure in the place. Women were actually climbing over barriers to get in before things were open. They were so curious about it. And of course, once the first part got underway and we added this new section and we saw how far we could go, it made it an endless source of interest around the community. People would call us and say, I've got a house, would you be interested in taking it? And so we kept the house movers pretty busy, keeping us supplied. There was a barn that was relocated on the property, and there were some farm buildings, a granary, and that was used for today it's a children's bookstore. And the Wold House itself is now a home to a children's shop. So, and the garden is, as it was, restored and well maintained, and it's just beautiful.
Today, the City of Issaquah boasts a number of historic features that have been preserved, among them the Pickering Barn, the Gilman Town Hall, the Issaquah Depot, and many of the buildings that make up Gilman Village.